Good evening, everybody. This is the first meeting of EITP in the 2020 meeting calendar, so I will start things off by opening up the election. So I'll ask if there are any nominations for the position of chair this evening. Or does it? Oh, Councillor Osanek?
I move that Councillor Stroud is the chair.
Excellent. Councillor Stroud, do you accept? All right, seconder, Councillor Doherty. Any other people willing to step forward and serve as chair? Seeing none, so I'll call the question on electing Councillor Stroud as chair. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. And I will now call for a nomination for vice chair. Councillor Stroud.
I nominate Councillor Neal.
Councillor Neal, do you accept the nomination?
I would. I'm just wondering, Councillor Holland was the previous vice chair?
So that was a lot of contention. It technically was Councillor Doherty who was the vice chair.
Well,
very rarely called upon.
Do you want to continue as vice chair? I mean, I'm happy to do it if you... She forgot she was the vice chair.
It's a good... It's a... Well, it was yourself, according to my minutes. I think occasionally somebody called on Councillor Holland and it happened quickly and she took it on. Normally, Councillor Stroud is here anyway, so it's just unless he's... So are you willing to accept it? All right, so just make sure. So I'll call Councillor Neal as the mover on that. Councillor Osanek as the seconder.
Happy to.
I'll assume no other nominations, so I'll close it and call the question. All those in favor? And that carries, and I'll now turn the chair over to crowd.
Yes, and if Councillor Doherty and myself aren't available, one of you will have to chair the committee anyway. So thank you for your support. So we'll call the meeting to order. There's an agenda with two items of business. There's minutes from last time, and there's no other items. So we need a mover and a seconder for the agenda. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Are there any proposed changes, reordering of the agenda? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on the agenda as printed. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. So we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was last month or 2 months ago on October 8th. You've received the minutes. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Are there any errors or omissions to the last meeting's minutes? Seeing none, we'll call the question on the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Delegations. There's none printed, but I believe we do have requests for delegation. We'll need...
They can speak during like the open, when comments come up in the report. So
okay, so... for members of the public that were wondering about the delegation, to be an official delegation, you have to apply to be on the agenda in advance, but each individual item is open to the public to speak, and there's actually no problem with that, and it can function as the same way, and if you have any material to present, you can do so at that time. So when the item comes up, we will ask for members of the public, and then you can come forward and use the microphone. So no delegations, briefings, no? Okay, so business, item 8, there's two things, A and B. The first one is A, roadside vegetation maintenance. See the report from the commissioner. There is a recommendation, but it's for information purposes only, so there's no actual recommendation to council. So this is to receive the information. We've got Mr. Linden from Public Works, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a update, just a brief summary of the road maintenance that Public Works performs on gravel shoulders, as well as the vegetation management along roadsides and along gravel shoulders. I do have a presentation on the screen. There's only a few pictures that I'm going to show you at certain points, so that I won't be actually using it for the presentation. But I do want to talk about some of the work we do along gravel shoulders. Gravel shoulders are a very important part of road infrastructure. They provide support for the road infrastructure itself, adequate drainage to convey water off the road surface to the ditch line, and for safety for the public, whether it's pedestrian use or for vehicles who may need to pull over the side of the road. Some of the common issues we experience on gravel roads are edge of pavement drop-offs. That's where the gravel adjacent to the pavement surface is lower than the pavement surface. I think we probably all experience that from time to time when we see that. Gravel can accumulate on the shoulder and be higher than the paved surface, which is an issue. Erosion and washouts are also a big issue on gravel shoulders after large rain events or even consecutive rain events. Vegetation alongside of the road, although it may not seem like it does, it can impede drainage and can be a concern as far as maintenance goes as well. And when that happens, shoulders get saturated and wheel rutting can become an issue. So to respond to that, Public Works has a regular shoulder maintenance program, and some of the routine maintenance involves road graders in the spring, for example, to grade every gravel shoulder. That pulls the gravel material back to the road edge. It fixes minor washouts and reestablishes the crossfall on the shoulders every spring. That same work is done every fall before winter freeze up to prepare the shoulders before the winter season, and then periodically throughout the summer months as required to repair the shoulders. We do experience non-routine maintenance requirements, and that would be in the form of washouts. It's very difficult to predict where a washout may happen on a gravel shoulder. There are some areas we watch for, but they could happen anywhere. And that requires new gravel being hauled to the site and equipment and tools to place and compact the gravel. So it is inevitable that through rains and spring runoff that we're going to experience some washouts along gravel shoulders. And oftentimes that gravel can collect at the grass line because the grass is higher than the gravel shoulder, and then create ponding, which then leads to wheel rutting and potentially more washouts. So for vegetation management, we have roadside mowers that we can cut the grass along the shoulder of the road to manage the vegetation. And in doing that, it improves sight lines as well as helps us maintain the drainage. I'm going to put an image up on the screen, so hopefully you can see that. That's an image of the gravel shoulder reclamation program that Public Works implemented a few years ago. In the background, you can see a tractor with an attachment. It's a set of agricultural discs that basically mulch up the gravel shoulder and the grass that grows along the edge and over time encroaches towards the driving surface. So what you see in the picture is what's the result, which basically reestablishes the gravel shoulder, and the vegetation would be mulched up, eventually dry out, and the wind would carry it away. A grader would then come by after this operation and reestablish the crossfall, which basically reestablishes the original gravel shoulder, saving significant costs for new gravel to repair the shoulders. So where we have challenges in those routine maintenance operations is in areas adjacent to or within guide rail locations. So guide rail locations are very important for public safety, and it's critical to protect motorists and make sure that the integrity of the guide rail system is intact. To use a motor grader to grade the shoulder in front of a gravel or a guide rail location is very difficult. They're often narrow, and they would leave material between the road and the guide rail, which again could pond water and then create additional issues. So what we do in Public Works is we would, in certain locations along guide rails, is spray the vegetation along the guide rail to manage that vegetation so that the grass doesn't grow higher, eventually cause visibility issues with the reflectors on the guide rail. It's important to know that the guide rail's there, not just that it is there, but to know there's a hazard present, and to maintain the drainage and then the life cycle of the guide rail posts so that there's moisture and water is not being retained adjacent to the posts. So we do spray. It is a hand spray, so it's very specific to the location. At no time does Public Works hire a tanker with a boom to spray any vegetation in any part of the city. So once the vegetation is sprayed and managed, it solves that problem, but the area is still susceptible to washouts. So a lot of guide rail locations that are located on embankments on a hill get a lot of rainwater that conveys off the surface of the driving surface onto the shoulder and can cause a washout in just about any location. So Public Works applies a granular sealing product at these locations to seal that granular surface and allow for the water to travel from the driving surface across the shoulder, past the guide rail, and then into the ditch where we want the water to be. This process and the granular sealing product is Ontario Provincial Standard approved product. It's approved by the Ministry of Transportation on their highways, and they've also approved it for municipal use on our highways. It's a type 2 water-based non-toxic solvent product that does meet the Environment Canada Code of Practice for volatile organic compounds, and is a very effective product to avoid expensive gravel repairs along guide rail and improve the integrity or keep the integrity of the guide rail system for the life cycle of the system. And I'll just show you a couple locations where we've applied the granular sealing. This location on the screen is Taylor Kidd Boulevard, looking east towards Mona Drive. So you can see that this is a hill with an embankment. There's no adjacent water bodies. It's just a rock embankment, and the water would flow quite quickly down that shoulder and eventually wash out at one or several locations. The application of the granular sealing allows the water to get away and avoids costly shoulder repairs. This image shows a location after the sealing has been placed where we've had a few rains and there's been some sand and dirt washed off the road surface, collected on the shoulder, but we haven't actually experienced a washout. It's conveying the water appropriately. This location is the road from Berryfield down the hill to Highway 2. Highway 2 is at the stop sign. A lot of water flows down both ditches, eventually washing out gravel. We've had problems where the gravel washes out onto Highway 2, and it's there's high traffic volumes and cyclist traffic on Highway 2, and not seeing gravel, not expecting gravel on the road could be a safety hazard. So we applied the granular sealing at the bottom of the hill, and it leads to the concrete gutter that would convey the water to the storm system, which is appropriate. And then here we have a location which is Station Road. Looking eastbound at the top of the hill is Highway 15. And you can imagine the volume of water that would run down the shoulder and eventually wash out the guide rail posts at one or multiple locations. After the application of the granular sealing, we've experienced 0 washouts at that location, again saving extensive maintenance costs. So that's kind of an overview of that program in Public Works, and I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Great. So it's an information report. It's questions from members of the committee. After members of the committee, we go to members of the public. So who would like to go ahead? Councillor Osterhoff.
Thanks, Mr. Linden, for your presentation. So is noxious weeds a different topic, or do you focus on that a bit when you do the spraying, and perhaps even ticks and that kind of thing? Or what do you include that in your scope, kind of, or your intention when you're spraying and managing them with the vegetation?
Through the chair. So noxious would be a separate maintenance activity. Public Works responds to noxious weed concerns anywhere on city property, whether it's a trail, park, roadside. But we do experience a significant amount of noxious weed growth on roadsides. So part of our roadside grass cutting program includes having the mowers cut wider than just the initial roadside pass, to try and manage noxious weed growth before a plant like wild parsnip goes to seed. And if we can do that effectively, we can manage the spread of the noxious weed. We get noxious weed growth around guide rails, so it's effective to spray there as well. But we will, all of our noxious weed spraying is hand sprayed. So it's a backpack spray, and it's isolated to the plant or the growth of plants. But yeah, it does happen along roadsides, and we do spray there.
Thank you. And a second question. So this past spring, we know was a very wet spring, and that created a lot of challenges for your department. But I was wondering, are you prepared at all for another wet spring and having additional equipment to cut the shoulders of the roads? Because I think that's something that seems to catch us off guard, it seems. And I'm wondering if it would be something you would consider. I received a lot of calls from constituents concerned about overgrowth again, and like how many mowers would we have going in the rural areas, which is obviously the biggest area you have and considerable amount of kilometers, but which I recognize. But I'm just wondering, is there any plans or considerations or budgeting to make a bigger effort? Because I think it's one of the areas that I see is it could be improved.
Through the Public Works has 3 tractor attachments. It is always a challenge. We shouldn't physically be out there until the grass is high enough to warrant cutting. But by the time we travel every road, which has 2 shoulders, wherever we end up, the grass is usually higher than ideal, just because it takes time to get to those shoulders. So if we start in one location one year, it's usually significant growth by the time we get the 3 tractors to every location. But we're aware of that, and we're looking at efficiencies to try and get to all the shoulder locations in a timely fashion. But if it is wet season, by the time the grass starts to grow, it grows pretty fast by the time we get to the end. So we are actively looking at solutions. We don't have any plans in 2020 for additional equipment, but we do hope to find some efficiencies, and that would be something we would consider in the future.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Along the same question, so those 3 tractors, like how many times do you manage to get to almost every street in a season?
Depending on the growth of the grass, it's at least 2, usually 3 cuts is what we plan for. And that usually would take us to the fall when we start to see, or it's August when we start to see the grass really stop growing. But there are areas that we would respond to more often if there's a lot of growth, especially if there's a sightline issue at a driveway or an intersection.
Mm-hmm. And when you said that you're trying to find efficiencies, like what? Like when you're physically actually limited with number of staff and number of tractors, like what kind of efficiencies would you be looking at?
So that would be route optimization. So we would basically tractor to the east, to the north, to the west, and focus on those roads. But we find there are efficiencies that can be gained by looking at where we cut first, where our turnaround points are, and just trying to manage how many kilometers we can cut in a day. And just looking at process.
Okay. Just one more question. When it comes to wild parsnip and noxious weeds, is that the same crew that would be out cutting the grass with those 3 tractors? Are they the same people dealing with the noxious weeds as well? Or do you have other, like, kind of ground stuff to do that?
If the noxious weed we would normally cut with a roadside tractor, we would just manage it that way with the tractor. If it's in an area, say adjacent to a green space in a park, we would use our park staff who are mowing the grass in those locations to manage it from a mechanical cutting perspective while we're doing the cut and before it goes to seed. Now, there are other plants that grow along walkways, pathways, and in green spaces, or even roadsides that you're not able to reach with the mowing equipment. And we always looked at trying to physically remove that plant if possible or reasonable. If we have to spray, we hire a contractor. Under the Pesticides Act, we have the ability to spray noxious weeds, but we have to have a licensed contractor or a license to do that, and the city does not have that, so we contract that out. So if we're spraying a noxious weed, it's not taking city staff away from cutting those areas.
Councillor Sanik.
Thank you much through you, Ms. One question about the granular sealant. So for those areas that just had it done in 2019, when will it have to be redone? Like, for instance, are you going to have to redo Taylor Kidd by Mona Drive next year in 2020, or how long does that sealant last for?
So the target resealing for the product we use is 3 years. So every 3rd year, we'd look at resealing those locations. But similar to many maintenance tasks that we perform in Public Works, if it warrants it, we would do it. If we could get another season out of it, we would. Maybe there's just a portion of it needs to be resealed, and we would look at that as well. There are products that have been used in the past by road authorities like the MTO that don't meet the code of practice that would take fewer reapplications, like over 4 or 5 years. But that's a byproduct of the safer product, as it needs an application more frequently, but the target would be 3 years.
And do you use any in 2019, like across wetland areas?
I'd have to look at my list, but we have, in the 2 years we've sprayed through wetland areas. It meets the standard, the application we applied, but we also realize there are potential concerns and conflicts for things like turtle nesting, for example. So there are areas that we've been actively identifying to not spray the granular sealing, as well as even the vegetation spray in some areas where there's significant wetlands.
Thanks. And on the report, graphs above where you start talking about the granular sealant, it talks about broadcast spraying with tanker trucks is not used by Public Works. But we had a report, like I had an email, Bridget, you might have had an email from a resident who said that they saw a tanker truck spraying along Front Road in Elevator Bay, which is right on the water. Do you know anything about that? Like, would we spray? Would we, even if it was noxious weeds and wild parsnip in there between Invista plant and the condos that are right there at Elevator Bay, where Front Road is right along the water, would we spray? We wouldn't spray in there, right? Because that's putting pesticide right next to Lake Ontario.
Through the chair, not actually aware of any noxious weeds in that location. We certainly haven't broadcast sprayed for noxious weeds. It's just simply something we don't do. We would hand spray if needed, but there are restrictions on how close you can hand spray to water as well. So if we're talking about that specific location where the road is really close to the water, we wouldn't be spraying in that location.
Thank you. And then we would, for noxious, so if it was wild parsnip in there, we would have, that would be contractors doing that on our behalf. So is it written right in the contract with the contractors that we don't allow, tanker trucks to spray? It's just because the one person, she was, like she saw that. And that's what she says. I didn't see it, but that was the email that she sent. So would we actually have that in the contract that they have to hand spray? Or do we just assume that they, took the course for noxious weeds and, their license could be lost if they get caught, that they're not doing? Like, do we actually have that in the contract, not to use tanker trucks to spray?
Yes, that's correct, we do. It's only, our contract actually has a rate for removal of the plant. So oftentimes we'll get the contractor to go to a location and their first option is to remove the plant. And then if the spraying is required, we have a price for that. But they follow our direction. So Public Works would direct them every time we call. We have these locations, here's our direction. And our contract is clear, our contractor is clear. Although they could risk losing their license by spraying close to water, that's the expectation. They'd want to keep their license, but we are clear that that is the expectation from the City of Kingston.
And now just about shoulders, maintenance, the roadside mowing, specifically across like water courses, right? So getting into the wetlands. So I think the report says that in 2019, we tried to schedule the grading of the shoulders earlier so that we do it in April and not in May when all the turtles start to come out. Then we also grade those wetland areas, I guess in November. Are those the only differences, that we treat shoulders in a wetland versus regular shoulders like on Taylor Kidd Boulevard or Highway 15? Are those the only differences, just those 2 times of year where we try to do the grading?
Through the chair. So for routine maintenance, the spring and the fall shoulder grading are the crucial ones. In some wetlands, we've worked with local community groups and with counselors that have drawn attention to concerns with turtle nesting and the weight of the equipment on the shoulder. So we've looked at areas like the Westbrook wetland to not cut the roadside grass through the wetland and monitor to see if there are any negative impacts by not cutting that roadside grass. There are some locations like that where there are no entrances or intersections, so sightline issues are less of a concern. In 2019, we didn't cut the grass in that one particular wetland in Westbrook, so that meant the mowers were not on the shoulder, potentially traveling over turtle nests. And we were fortunate that we didn't require any significant maintenance on the shoulder in that area as well, so there were no graders or heavy equipment working there. If there was a significant washout, however, we would have to respond to that. It's a public safety and a liability issue. But that would be an isolated location within that area. But we are looking actively at wetlands like that and how we can adjust our maintenance efforts with the focus on the spring and the fall.
So could we see the plan for 2020 then for those shoulders over wetland areas will be to try to do the grading in April and then again later in the fall and to leave the grass? Like, is that what's going to be the plan for next year?
That plan worked for 19, so we certainly intend to follow that in 2020 for wetlands like the Westbrook wetland. But again, I would just mention that if there are significant washouts, we would have to react to those, but the routine maintenance would follow what we did in 19.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, my last question. Is it possible then between now and the spring just to get a map of some sort as to, or it could just be a list, and we all have maps of Kingston. I'm sure we can find where it is. But according to Public Works, what they consider to be the wetland areas where like this special procedure might be done of mowing, or sorry, of grading the shoulders in April. Would that be possible?
Yeah, for sure. I think the list, there's only a handful of areas where there's roads beside a significant wetland. But that's the approach we'd want to take in similar areas. So, yes.
Just a quick follow. Councillor Sanik's questioning about the broadcast spraying. I'm wondering if, because there's always the great debate, where does city property end, where does private property begin? Would we be able to get some assurance that Invista or the bordering properties aren't hiring somebody to do broadcast spraying on their property, but it's getting done in our areas as well, on city property as well? Was that a logical question?
It's certainly a logical question. The answer is a little more difficult. From a public works perspective, we wouldn't have the authority. The city does have a pesticide bylaw. So without speaking on behalf of another department, there may be mechanisms there to approach private property owners if they're applying pesticides. That's about as much as I can offer at this point because it would fall outside of Public Works authority.
Okay, and I'm just curious, the granular sealing product, which I think on the far right is the solid black treatment, is that the granular sealing product?
Yes, on all three photos, it's the same product.
So is that is that easy to cycle on as well, or is it still fairly rough like a gravel shoulder would be?
Yes, essentially it's as a gravel shoulder would be. It's a thin seal coat over top of the existing gravel shoulder. It's not meant to improve cycling traffic, just to convey water from the road surface to the ditch. It's not meant to be a paved shoulder.
And could you, the full slide one? I think that's the road, yeah, that's the road leading up to a stop sign where it was identified that you have recurring washouts towards the stop sign. Is that
That's correct.
accurate? At some point in time, given the cost of that, or the cost of doing granular sealing of that, would it be possible to put a hard surface and continue? Because I would seem that you could cycle on the one side of the white line, but when you get close to that, you're getting into gravel as well. Is that a consideration that can be made for future, for that kind of a location?
Yes, so often because Public Works is on the roads maintaining the shoulders and the roadways, we work with engineering, transportation services to identify areas that could be included in capital projects for capital improvements, similar to that type of example. And if it's a small scale, it's something Public Works would look at doing in-house as well.
And clearly that vision would support active transportation master plan where we have dollars allocated, in capital dollars allocated. So, thank you.
Any other questions from? I have a question again about the granular sealant. Do we have any information on, and specific to turtle nesting, do we have any information on whether the granular sealant has any effect on that spring nesting that the turtles might do in the soft gravel in the wet season.
So the information we have from the suppliers and through the approvals through MTO is that it's not a marine pollutant and it's not toxic, when it's cured. That said, we're looking at wetland areas and not using this product if we know it's a known turtle nesting area. I can't stand before you and say that no, it's not, or yes, it is, but if there's a chance it is, maybe we just avoid doing it in those areas completely.
So that would be along the line of the comments you were saying about giving special treatment to the wetland shoulders. So no grading during the sensitive times and no application of the granular sealant at all if we suspect turtle activity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that would be accurate. I would say that there's probably locations that aren't in wetlands that you may see a turtle nest, but we have worked with local groups to identify key areas, known areas of nesting. We work with training our staff to identify what turtle nesting areas look like, and then we would plan our program around that. Where the granular sealing is really effective is on hills and grades, like I've shown in the pictures, where we don't tend to see turtle nesting, but it really is a benefit for drainage.
So, and further to what Councillor Stanek was asking about that list, so that we could at least refer to it when we're dealing with constituents. If a constituent or a councillor identifies a turtle nest, because sometimes that happens, we're told of that turtle nest was spotted somewhere. Is that something we could forward on to Public Works so that you could add it to your list of somewhere that we know there's active turtle nesting?
Yes, absolutely. We've also worked with a consultant to identify sensitive areas for species at risk, so that impacts a lot of our maintenance activities, not just shoulder work. So yeah, we're absolutely, any information at all is helpful.
Thank you. So seeing no further questions from members of the committee, we'll go to members of the public. The only rules are you need to identify yourself, come to a microphone, and there's normally a 5-minute limit. If you need longer than 5 minutes, we'd have to get consent from the committee to extend your time, which shouldn't be a problem on a day like today when there's only 2 business items. Councillor Stanek, do you want to speak?
Yeah, just as Armstrong gets set up. So I know that Ms. Armstrong, she also wants to speak on behalf of her husband, did research on granular sealants. So it would probably be 5 minutes and then another 5 minutes to speak so that we don't interrupt. Should we do the motion now to extend it, or what do you prefer?
I think following the rules of procedure, we should just allow her to present twice, because if it's 2 separate subject matters, there may be questions from members of the committee to the first section, and then it makes sense to keep it separate. But as far as the time limit, I wouldn't worry too much about the time limit, because the committee is the place where we can have longer deliberations. So it just takes a motion from a member of committee to give you more time, so that's not really an issue.
PHEW.
Yeah.
Phew.
Yes. Okay. So you've got the floor. You just state your name and say your piece.
Thank you. There's documents to be distributed. First, I want to start with an acknowledgement of Bill Linnon. I started working with Bill over the past year or so, sending texts to Lisa Osanek. They've mowed the grass on the wetland again. And then with the situation that happened last year on Unity Road, which made the news, which was very awkward, and I know that focused a lot on Bill as Director of Public Works. And he has more than stepped up to the plate. I can't express enough gratitude for his courage and foresight, professionalism, compassion to reschedule the maintenance program, as he so humbly referred to in his presentation, but just in a minimal way. That decision has had a massive impact on the turtle populations. He delayed the road maintenance of mowing, of spraying, which I'll go into later on, for the entire turtle season, from the end of May to the end of September, which included the males that were marauding about in August looking for a female, for the hatchlings coming out in the month of September. So they were protected for the entire turtle season. That is so commendable. I can't even begin to express the words. You would not believe the documents that I have on road ecology, on road maintenance issues. And it has set precedents, and he's a perfect example for the city as far as being a city of innovation. Because in taking, in that flexibility, in changing the schedule of the maintenance outside of emergency procedures where liability is involved, and for those people who live near a wetland whose sight lines have to be cleared for their entranceways, the general practice is to not do it. And he used Westbrook as an example because he knew if he didn't, I know where he lives. And he'd be dealing with a Tasmanian devil, because I am extremely protective of that particular wetland. I almost live on it, and I am so appreciative for his initiative to do this. It has set precedent, like Kingston, like the city of Kingston and other areas, in that 2 other communities, because we posted this on Facebook and we made a big deal about it because it is a big deal. And he was approached by 2 other counties, apparently, that are facing the same issues and are considering implementing the same schedule to the best of their abilities. So it has set precedent. So I wanted to thank Bill in this context. I really wish the room was fuller, but I really believe that he's the right person at the helm of the job because he has the flexibility, the foresight, the professionalism, and I can't thank him enough. Thank you. No, that's not the presentation. So now I get on to the presentation. There's going to be referrals to photos, and I do want to say that there's going to be issues that I'm going to make reference to that are going to seem like I'm throwing Bill under the bus. I am not. This is practices that have been remedied by his changing of the schedule, but our concern is to formalize them with the council to make sure that this is a standard operating practice, because it's that important in the wetlands. Okay, get ready, because here we go. I'm going to read very quickly. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, of the World Health Organization released a report in 2015 indicating glyphosates are most likely carcinogenic to humans and are linked to an increased risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. 2 new studies have linked glyphosates to aggressive breast cancer and have also revealed alarming generational changes in offspring, confirming the impact on 2nd and 3rd generations. These new studies point to convincing evidence that the chemical is affecting human chemistry at the genetic level, turning on negative disease-causing traits even into future generations. It increases susceptibility to health problems and increased infertility. A 2018 study concluded that 90% of pregnant women had detectable glyphosate levels, and that these levels correlated significantly with shortened pregnancy lengths. Glyphosates are the main ingredient in the herbicide Roundup and is one of the products used in the vegetation management by the city of Kingston. There are currently more than 42,000 people suing Monsanto, the maker of Roundup, in the United States, with more than 18,000 lawsuits that have been filed. Glyphosates don't disappear, so when you use them for commercial or residential purposes, they stay in the environment, creating a serious environmental issue. Glyphosate herbicides are now banned or restricted in 22 countries worldwide. Costco has pulled Roundup from its shelves due to public pressure and because of the fact that other retailers have been named in legal action like Lowe's and Walmart because they chose not to pull it from their shelves. Bayer, who purchased Monsanto for $66 billion in 2016, has lost 3 high-profile cases against its Roundup product with settlements ranging from $289 million to $2.4 billion, causing the company to lose investor confidence, stock price, and public favor. This past spring, Merchant Law Group filed the first class action lawsuit in Canada, filing statements of claim in every province from Quebec to British Columbia, with a significant number of claimants coming from the prairies, the agricultural industry. In July 2019, Diamond & Diamond, a national personal injury law firm in Canada, spearheaded a $500 million class action lawsuit for the withholding of information that the product causes cancer. A review by CBC Radio Canada of internal Monsanto documents disclosed in the court case of Dwayne Johnson last year, who sued Monsanto and won $78 million last October, showed the many efforts the company took to fight the IARC assessment. The documents reveal communications between Monsanto and a Canadian firm hired to recruit scientists to publish studies that ultimately defended glyphosate, some of which were secretly reviewed by Monsanto prior to publication. All the papers previously reported by CBC Radio Canada were used as part of Health Canada's reapproval process of glyphosate in 2017. Monsanto operated a fusion center, that's what they called it, to monitor and discredit journalists and activists, and targeted a reporter who wrote a critical book on the company, and in addition, targeted the singer Neil Young. The internal communications add fuel to the ongoing claims in court that Monsanto has bullied critics and scientists and worked to conceal the dangers of glyphosate. In January, Health Canada said that the assertion of improper or misleading citations was disconcerting, but did not alter the agency's final decision regarding continued registration of glyphosate. As part of its final decision in January, Health Canada rejected the 8 notices of objection filed by doctors, academics, and medical groups that wanted an independent panel to review its reapproval decision. There is an obvious reason for Health Canada's reluctance to ban the substance, and that is to protect the agricultural industry, who extensively use genetically modified crops. 100% of the seeds of Roundup-ready crops, as they're called, like soy, corn, and canola, have been spliced with glyphosates, making them impervious to the massive amounts of glyphosates that are later sprayed on those crops as an herbicide. It's insanity, actually. The industry is having to use, this year, 15 times the amount of the product because the weeds are now resilient. Health Canada is under pressure to protect the agro industry, so is looking the other way, as it does not have an alternative solution for the farmers. They want to avoid another national industry from collapsing, especially in Western Canada. There are many countries that are starting to ban the imports of genetically modified crops. I would recommend that you go to the Institute for Responsible Technology. They have excellent videos on YouTube that explain this whole story very concisely. What does this have to do with turtles? Everything. And this is where I'll ask you to please refer to the photos in your package. Glyphosate is a broadleaf herbicide and is effective only when sprayed on the broadleaf of the intended plant to be eliminated. It is not to be sprayed in wetlands and not on roads where there is a particular slope for obvious reasons because of the runoff. The slope encourages the product to run down into the water table. There are confirmations that the product does not leave the environment. There is the issue of bioaccumulation in the sediments of the wetlands. This may have catastrophic consequences in the future. This will have. The wetlands are our freshwater reservoirs. Ontario has 20% of the world's freshwater supply. We can't be so readily disrespecting that fact. Turtles are called the wetland janitors because of the huge amounts of bacteria-producing carrion they consume, keeping our freshwaters clean. Just today, there was an article on Global stating that there are already 2 billion people, 25% of the world's population, who are at risk to not have fresh water. 25% of the world's population. That number will continue to rise with climate change. People are already migrating, looking for water sources.
Hang on a sec, Mrs. Armstrong. I need consent of the committee to extend the time. You're over 10 minutes now.
Is it over 10?
You're at about 11 or 12 minutes now.
Dear.
Moved by Councillor Osana, seconded by Councillor Doherty, that we grant another 5 minutes. All those in favor? All opposed? That passes. Go
Double
ahead.
few.
You have 5 more minutes.
Okay, really faster. The photos show that the roadsides were mowed on May 29th. That's the first photo in your package. During the beginning of the turtle nesting season. This is going back to 2018. And again, a lot of this has been changed because of Bill's courageous decisions to change things this year. This is a consequential practice, and I'm going to justify why he changed it. Because there is a high probability that the mower would not see a nesting turtle and run over it, or it would get hit with the mowing blade. The travesty is that the roadsides were sprayed after they were mowed, as shown evident by the comparison of the dates on the photo, showing the mowed roadside, May 29th, and the photo of the warning sign that was posted at the wetland, of which there was only one, indicating the date of spraying to be the mid to late June. The actual spraying happened on the week of June 13th. So this is a broadleaf herbicide. It is not to be sprayed on a cut plant, because guess what happened? It all ran off, because there was nothing to hold it, ran down the slopes into the water table. That is crazy. Now, this work was subcontracted out. So obviously, there was negligence on behalf of the subcontractor. I sent an email to Councillor Osanic the night I took the photo of the mowed roadside and expressed my concern that, like the previous year, the roadsides would be sprayed during nesting season and again after, because it happened again also in 2017, which is exactly the opposite of the instructions for the use of the herbicide. In addition, I had previously expressed my concern about the 3,500-pound payloader driving directly on top of the nesting lines, as shown in the photos. The wetland was sprayed during the peak of nesting season. And there's photos of a snapping turtle nesting in amongst the dead foliage. With the newer research that is now coming out because Monsanto is no longer in the position to camouflage the data, it is of grave concern, particularly the recent research showing the impact on second and third generations. I consulted with a number of biologists who specialize in turtles, and they stated that there is no doubt that the chemicals would affect the developing embryos on the eggs. Turtles are the most imperiled vertebrate species on the planet. Habitat loss is the principal reason, followed by road mortality. It is difficult to comprehend the allowance of practices that not only affect the welfare of the adult turtles, but also their offspring. We don't have to make the road to their extinction any more challenging. In addition, you can see that the photos dated June 13th, it is evident that the spray not only focused on the vegetation around the rail guards, but it's also down the slope. So I don't know how the heck they sprayed that far down the slope with a hand sprayer. You can see the photo in the photos that the vegetation is all brown and dying. Now, very quickly on to granular sealants. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You see in the photos a turtle nesting in the midst of the granular sealant. We were contacted by a Facebook supporter who sent us a photo of Burbank Road that showed a black substance, asking us what it was. We had no idea. We later found out that that was phase 2 of the roadside maintenance program. First, you use the glyphosites to destroy everything that's living. Then you spray this granular sealant. I went to Burbank Road and collected some. It had been sprayed like 3 days before. I could not get it off my gloves, and that's after 3 days of exposure minimum. So could you imagine the peril of a female turtle returning to her habitual nesting place that she'd used for decades, because remember that they can live over 100 years, and find it sprayed with this gooey substance? Snappers have very long claws, and I'm referring to snappers because they're the ones that you find most often on the roadsides. They aren't for aggressive reasons or defensive reasons. They're used to navigate the terrain. Imagine her getting that stuck in between her claws. How is she going to get it off? Turtles use their bills, their hooked nose, to test the ground to find a suitable nesting spot. Imagine it getting stuck at the end of their bill. She wouldn't be able to, or it could challenge her to be able to eat or to continue finding an appropriate nesting spot. They only have one orifice, turtles, that they do everything through, even butt breathing during hibernation. Imagine if that sensitive area got clogged with this stuff. And if they do successfully nest, there in that photo it shows that the turtle has dragged that stuff into the nest with their eggs. So what's going to happen to the developing embryo, and what's going to happen to the hatchlings when they emerge? We know that this stuff seems to stay tacky because of the intensity of the heat of the sun. So it also holds more heat as related to climate change. So if they're deterred from nesting in their habitual spot, they're going to try to cross the road looking for somewhere successful, which means we've now pushed them into surely a death zone, because more than 2/3 of turtles do not make it crossing roads. So the answer is clear and simple. We're asking that the City of Kingston make the necessary motions to change these practices to those that truly respect the environment and the endangered species living there. We hope that Kingston celebrates its biodiversity and unique environment of being located in the middle of a provincially significant wetland by implementing the measures necessary to protect and respect its delicacy. And I respectfully submit this on behalf of Turtles Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Armstrong. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? This is to remind everyone, to the information report on number A, roadside vegetation maintenance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon. I have sort of points and questions across a range of topics. Thank you to Mr. Lennon for the presentation and the report, and to the questions from the committee and amazing presentation we just saw. I'm going to start off by sharing some compliments, which I got a little while ago. Just a conversation with American military officer engineer who's posted here. Is very impressed with how Canada in general maintains its roads as compared to most of the US. So it was just sort of interesting. Didn't expect it. So just some questions. We've had the winter control reports recently presented. I think you're in charge of that. I remember you giving them. I'm just wondering how the winter control maintenance programs that you run interact with this. Like you're putting on a lot of salt and sand as part of your winter maintenance, and then that gets basically plowed over to the sides, right? And then where it's interacting with the vegetation. So didn't see anything in the report necessarily about that. And then as you're doing your maintenance, as you describe in the report, anything specific on sort of interaction with wildlife that you encounter there. So I guess that covers sort of the previous presenters area. Have you noticed any increase in washouts with climate change in recent years. We've had a lot of maybe bigger, wetter storms. And then just sort of going along with that, I'm wondering if you chart those areas and if maybe you could present them maybe on a map sort of showing them, and then that those might be areas for looking at a re-engineering of the areas around and near the road and the roadside, just to try to prevent that. I'm sure you're thinking about that anyway. Next question, the area in and around the VIA station, is that a city responsibility or is that a VIA responsibility? Okay. We know that there is a lot of catch-up that's needed on rural roads in Kingston. We've heard about that a number of times through points being raised by councillors for those areas. And I'm wondering if there is a catch-up also on the vegetation maintenance for those roads, because there's a lot of road area out there that the city has acquired through amalgamation. So I'm sort of wondering about that. Do you have to use hand maintenance in certain areas just because of the slopes and harder to get at? And do you cut the vegetation down in the autumn? Or do you leave it long? I'm just sort of curious about that. I think that's more or less it. I think the council covered, or the committee covered a number of my points other than that. So maybe don't have answers to all of those right away, but I want to sort of get them on the record and maybe had them thought about. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? So now staff has the chance to respond to the members of the public in the committee setting. Mr. Lynn?
Through the chair, I'll speak to the direct questions. And hopefully I caught all the questions, but winter maintenance does require the placement of salt and sand. That material, that sand, does migrate to the gravel shoulders. Because it's a gravel product, it becomes part of the shoulder typically. In the urban setting, we do spring sweeping to pick up that material and to haul it back to our yard. There are a couple of rural locations where we do that at intersections, anywhere there's a storm system like catch basins. But I would say generally that sand becomes part of the gravel shoulder just because that's where it ends up at the end of the season. Increase in washouts. Individual washouts isn't something that we track on a per washout basis. What tends to happen if we notice an area is susceptible to washouts and we're repairing the same washout after every major storm, we look for solutions. Granular sealing on a hill adjacent to guide rails is one of those solutions. Installing an asphalt spillway to reinforce the shoulder where the water is going. If we're experiencing a washout in the same location, we know that's where the water wants to go. We can install an asphalt spillway that will prevent future washouts. So we look at long-term maintenance in those cases. For that reason, we don't really track, washouts that happen in the same location over and over because we try and fix the problem. But to answer the question, we do not track specific locations. It's hard for me to say if we've noticed an increase in washouts due to this type of storms we're experiencing due to climate change. And we certainly don't map the locations at this point in time. It's really, we'll do the routine maintenance and we try and find permanent solutions, and it's not something that's currently tracked. The VIA station, the property around the VIA station, there is a road right away I'm aware of through some of the design drawings I've seen through the engineering project that's taking place on John Counter Boulevard. But there is a large area outside the road allowance and that is VIA property. Catch up on rural roads as far as vegetation management go. I think Public Works has had a presence in the rural area. We've really looked at some of our activities in recent years. Roadside brushing program was re-implemented 4 years ago. to focus on maintaining the right-of-way. The roadside grass cutting has always been an activity that takes place largely in the rural area. As I mentioned earlier, we are looking at efficiencies to try and respond to the timeliness of that cut, or those cuts that take place. So we are actively always looking for ways to improve our maintenance, do it more efficiently, and do it cheaper. And yes, oftentimes a lot of our maintenance work requires handwork, whether that's raking, shoveling, even pothole patching is an example of handwork that we do on a regular basis outside of a lot of manual type of tasks that our crews perform. I may have missed one question in there. I'm not sure. Okay, thank you.
So this is an information report. It is on the public record, as the conversation today is also on the public record. Just remind citizens that they can also email their councillor with further information, and we look forward to the next update. Thank you. There's no recommendation.
No further questions or statements, but
If you, yeah, no, I mean, the item is still on the agenda, so if you have any further comments or questions, it's in order.
Great, so in the handouts that we got, it says Burbank Road. It's Burbrook, right? I was pretty sure Burbrook. So, Mr. Lennon, can we have that put on the list of roads? Because like it definitely shows a female snapping turtle trying to weigh in through the Grand Lake. That's definitely, it's definitely a wetland area, right? Because there's the turtle right there.
Yeah, so we'd certainly look at any location. I wouldn't say we're going to add or take away items from a list, but we'd work with Mrs. Armstrong or any councillor, any concern that's brought forward. And if we can identify that location, that's certainly under consideration, absolutely.
Councillor Doherty.
You mentioned that they're only full of areas that are near wetland. Are you kind of looking at all of those areas and saying if you could use the same practice that Ms. Armstrong described, that you no longer use these, just leave it alone during the nesting season from May to September?
Yes, actively looking at the other wetland locations. We're really trying to focus on identifying that species like turtles are actually nesting in those areas. That's an important part of the equation, we feel. There was a reference to Unity Road wetland. In that particular case, there were some significant washouts that we had to attend to. It did get a lot of media attention, but that's another example of a location we would be considering for whether roadside grass cutting is required. And in that case, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I can't picture any entrances through the wetlands, so it could probably work there as well.
Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, through your chair. Mr. Lennon, I'd like to personally thank you for your efforts. They've been extraordinary. It's been a pleasure working with you trying to address these issues. Is there anything from your perspective that council can do to assist you in performing your job even more effectively to help address these types of issues going forward? Is there something you need us to bring forward in future budgets? Is there anything that you can think of? And if you don't have to be on the spot and answer today, but do reach out to us, because there's certainly a demand from the citizenry of Kingston to support you in your efforts, and we'd like to be able to do that.
That's very much appreciated. I think from a public works perspective, we want to look at our infrastructure, what's appropriate in the circumstances, what's approved by other government agencies, as far as what we can and can't do or able to do. Look at efficiencies, look at unique circumstances, and then present what we feel we need for resources or policy for that matter.
Okay, well, that concludes item A. So we'll move on to item B, which is the report from Keefe about the state of the environment reporting. There is recommendation here that will go to council. So we'll get staff to introduce the item and then go through the regular procedure. Mr. Hugenboss.
Mr. Chair, and Paul McClatchy sends his regrets. He's unable to be here tonight. The report in front of you is a summary recommendation of the key elements of a state of environment report. That would be an annual report from Keefe. It, I think, was very well received by the committee. I know there are two members from Keefe here tonight on this committee, and a lot of buy-in, a lot of involvement in creating a outline of what can be reported on through this committee to council annually by Keefe based on data for metrics that is readily available, that can be interpreted and brought forward. The committee did make a few minor, I wouldn't say minor, but a few revisions. I don't mean to downplay them, but did make just a couple of revisions to the staff recommendation. We wholeheartedly support those changes, and I think this is something that really can be embraced annually by Keefe and will provide a lot of value and insight into the state of the community from an environmental perspective across many measures across the spectrum. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
I'd like to start with a very general question. Just so it's kind of a procedural question, but in staff's understanding, this schedule, if passed by council, if it needs to be altered in the future, like new metrics come up or some metrics are empty because we can't get the data or whatever, what would be the procedure to update this this policy?
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely, if there are recommendations through Keefe or through this committee or through council on the first annual report, which will be the first one mid-year in 2020, definitely the policy for Keefe does acknowledge that there may need to be changes or commentary based on the results, and that feedback can come back through council, through the committee, through staff, and be adjusted as seen fit, because things do change.
And so in that case, if there were changes, it would come back to the committee again and would go back to council with our recommendation. If Keefe has said that something needs to be changed, it would just go through the same process as we see today. So, yeah.
Yeah, but of course, when it comes through to council, council can just direct staff and the committee to add or subtract something when it comes through annually.
Okay, any other questions from members of the committee? Remember, we'll just do questions at this point, and then when we move it and second it is when we get into deliberations. So if you start expressing your own positions or opinions, I will have you save it for later. Go ahead, Councillor Sanek.
There you, Mr. Chair. Under biodiversity, under core metric, and then we have tree plantings, and we're going to be recording the net new plantings per year. I just also wondered if we could add to that information from Public Works as to which species we planted, so we can try to get an idea if we're always planting honey locusts, or if we're doing a big biodiversity of trees, getting oaks in there and other more substantial trees.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sure that information can be provided with that. I don't know if we need to make a formal change or not. I can seek direction from Ms. Roche, but I'm sure we can provide that through from Public Works with a number of new plantings.
Interpretation from the way the schedule reads is that Mr. McClatchy, when he's putting together the State of Environment report, we could just remind him that we would like to see the species breakdown, and because that speaks directly to biodiversity, as you were saying, and I'm sure that would be possible. Yes, Councillor Osterhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just picking up on Councillor Osanek's thoughts there, and having some of the issues in the rural area where we've seen trees planted where we feel they shouldn't have been planted, and without really considering plans that we've understood. So I was wondering, just like we did at the EITP, we showed a great map of the city and whether we could maybe, I don't think it's that difficult with computers today, we could kind of show some of the progress in these metrics and the secondary metrics, an idea of where we're planting, where I understand we're running out of space, so, and that we need maybe private owners to participate in it. So there'd be a really interactive map that we could use to show where we've been, perhaps where we are right now and where we're going, and we could watch that progress. I think I'd like to recommend that and consider it, and hopefully it's something we could embrace and grow with.
Sorry about that. Through you, Chair. Understand the question. I'm not sure if the State of the Environment report from Keefe is the best place for something like that. I think I understand what you're saying, and I don't want to pass it off to my friends in Public Works that we're just here, but as far as where the plantings are happening and how that is proceeding, I think it needs to be handled through the department that's actually handling those things, and I don't know if, I wouldn't say it's, with all the metrics and what the intent of the State of the Environment, the exact locations interactive map that you're talking about would be the right place through the State of Environment report.
So so you're saying there's another department that would handle that, Keefe, that might be outside of Keefe's ability?
Yeah, it was definitely not a part of Keefe's mandate on that. They might be able to weigh in on that information, but I think you're best suited to speak with Public Works as part of the overall tree planting program throughout the city and knowing where they're targeted.
Okay, I will send a letter to Public Works and maybe attach you if you're okay, and then we can maybe have a discussion on that and share more of the idea there. Thanks.
Yes, so Chair of the committee, just remind members, so Keefe has worked on this State of the Environment thing. This is an annual report meant to be benchmarks that we can follow over time. Something like a map of plantings with, especially if we're including species and so on, that level of detail is available from staff. You probably can just get it by asking. If it requires significant work to produce that map, then it might require a motion at this committee to direct staff to do that work. So that's so depending on what response you get. Yeah. Councillor Sanek.
I think I just add something, Mr. Chair, to that conversation. I know that Public Works is returning back to this committee in the new year to give us an update on the urban forest management plan. So that is when we can ask the question about where the trees are being planted.
Yeah, so it comes to this committee, but it's not part of the State of the Environment report, which is really just a tally of how many net new plantings and then, if possible, by species. Okay, so any other questions about the State of the Environment report? Okay, so we go to members of the public for questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to staff for putting this together. I think it's significant. High quality work, no question about it. Just a number of points on various areas. Going to page 9 near the top, talking about water and the core metric. And you got an acronym there, the CSO acronym, and I didn't see that defined as to what that is anywhere in the report. So I'm just wondering if you might be able to explain what that is. We're all dealing with acronyms, all over our lives, right? So hard to keep track of them all sometimes. So my next 2 points are connected to something I said at council when the Tannery Lands report came down through the latest update on the development plans that are going on there. So what you have here with this report is essentially you have a fundamental set of guidelines that you're creating, like a framework for citywide evaluation of environmental aspects, right? So that's a tremendous achievement. Now we have to apply it. And the Tannery Lands project is likely the most challenging and likely probably the most expensive environmental renovation we're going to have to do. This is a tough one. And the fact that it's resisted any change since it was abandoned in 1973 indicates that. It's a large area, it's very polluted, it's on the water. So I guess my general question is, with this report, I'm wondering if staff might be able to comment on the specifics of the Tannery Lands file as it relates to this report. So that's kind of like a global type question, and it's not something that's going to be easily answered, right? It's maybe an analysis in and of itself. But we are getting into more intensive examination of the Tannery Lands file, right? There's been an estimate made as to the cost of the cleanup that was in the report presented recently. So I'm wondering if this report could assist that. There was no explanation as to where that number came from. So with the Tannery Lands file, you have one report dealing with the water side, right? You have RMC-led report that's public on the pollution that's offshore there. And then we have a report that we can't get at yet. And we got an ongoing problem whenever you have rain or snow coming onto that section. It flows into the water system, right? As it has for 150 years. And it's taking some of the pollution with it as it goes.
I'm just, Mr. Dixon, I just got to point out as chair, the specific file that you're referring to is not subject to this State of the Environment report, which talks about metrics. So the specific development applications would not be part of the report as written. Also, there's with active development of applications, staff wouldn't be permitted to release the information that you're referring to, even in a different context. So, but for the purposes of tonight, just try to keep your comments to the actual metrics and the way that this State of the Environment report is presented.
Okay, well, I appreciate the clarity explanation on that. I am a little bit confused because we have two things going on at the same time. We have this report coming, and it's going to go to council. This is the Environment Committee.
Point, if I might.
Point of order.
This is a template for a report. This is not a report. All this does is it takes a previous State of the Environment report, and after 5 very, very busy meetings, it draws up a template, and probably by Q3 or Q4, there will be a detailed report coming back. And at that time, there will be issues such as runoff, such as brownfield remediation impacts. But this is just merely a template for a report. It is in no way a report.
Thank you. So my ruling is basically what I said, is keep your comments restricted to the general nature of the way that the information is proposed to be collected, and try to stay away from specifics of individual files, which is not subject to this report.
All right. That more or less ends what I had to say. What I'm saying is we're getting into, I would say this report is an advance. I'm happy to see it. And we've got to make sure that it gets applied, right? It can't be just sitting on the shelf and not being used. So I'm encouraged with the activism of this council, that it's paying attention, and the work being done by staff, that we're going to see responsible environmental management at a different level in the city than we've seen before, at a higher level. So I'm pleased about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Please come forward to a microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Roger Healy. I'm chair of KEEF. So I was really just here to hopefully, if there answer any questions, I can answer the question raised by Mr. Dixon that CSO refers to combined sewer overflow events. And that happens with the old sewer system, which we still have vestiges of, combines sanitary sewer and road runoff overflow. In strong rain events, we still get combined sewer overflow events. And I would hope that as sewer repair work continues, this number will decrease over time. But if rain events become more common, maybe not. So anyway, that's one thing I'll mention. We should spell out what that is for sure. But Councillor Neal is correct that this was really just a template, and earlier your question to do with new metrics. I mean, really, this is just a shopping list of things that I think Paul McClatchy was going to make sure that staff have these metrics and can reliably reliably show these every year. And in the case of you've seen over the years stuff with the biodiversity is pretty small at this point, but all the waste metrics that we've talked about through this for years over the city, that information is changing. As you probably know, that some of the measurements are changing over time, and so yeah, we will have to react with over time as new information becomes available that pertains to these subjects. But anyway, we just wanted to make sure that we covered as much as we reasonably could. But I still think this could change a little bit, but it will come back in a final version or close to final version to this committee, I think.
Thank you. The committee structure doesn't really provide for interaction with members of the public back and forth, as it were, with committee members, but staff is permitted to respond to questions from members of the public. So at this point, if staff has anything to say.
Yeah, just real quick to my Deputy Commissioner over there, Roger Healy, for answering CSO is correct, combined sewer overflow events. And the timeline as set out in the new mandate for KEEF as supported by Council is by June 30th to come with an information report to Council annually for state of environment. I would say that maybe the first one, hopefully we'll make it. I think definitely going forward, once the first one gets done and then metrics are there and things go, that mid-year timeline can be hit. Just ask for maybe, we will aim for that, and I think it's doable. But as Councillor Neal said, it might be into Q3, depending on how it goes. This will be the first run at it. But I don't think I have anything further to add. Thank you.
Great, so I'll look for a mover and a seconder for Councillor Neal and Councillor Sanik. That the Environment, Infrastructure and Transportation Policies Committee recommend to Council that the terms of reference attached as Exhibit A as amended, and that as amended was as amended by KEEF, right? So Exhibit A as amended to report number KEEF 19-005 be accepted by Kingston City Council and used by the KEEF in consultation with city staff to create an annual State of the Environment report. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any comment? Councillor Neal.
Yes, just really quick back. There was an earlier version of this that came out some years ago at KEEF, but never, as I understand it, morphed into an actual report. Like all committees of council, we've been tasked, rightfully, with an annual report. And this represents that annual report of Keefe. It was quite a few members of Keefe attended quite a few meetings and brainstormed this. But the understanding all along was that this was a living document, and other people could come forward and say, biodiversity, couldn't we have a metric that talks about turtle mortality? That kind of thing would, as long as it's a metric that's available, that would be a sensible thing to add to this. So this list isn't meant to be exhaustive or complete. It will grow as we're able to. And not every one of these items will necessarily be in the final report. All that this is, like I said, a template where we've identified where we can get metrics, where there's available data that we can access for the final report. So I think this reflects a lot of really hard work, and it's a great first step towards an annual report that we can bring forward. So, and I believe I saw a hand out over there.
Bell, you've got the floor.
Thank you, through your chair. Just a compliment on what Councillor Neal was saying. I know that you brought forward the motion with regards to the wildflowers and replacing some grassy areas and have more wildflowers. That also could possibly be a metric to know how much areas we've turned over to more natural habitat rather than having to mow it all the time, things like that.
Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Report looks fantastic. I'm so looking forward to seeing the State of Environment report. It's long overdue, and kudos to Keefe. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to speak, so Madam Vice Chair, if you would take this. Okay, so I'd like to say on behalf of the residents of Sydenham that we're very happy to see this, as Councillor Neal said, as an iteration of the annual report from Keefe, having served on Keefe in the past, and wondering, you know, sometimes you go to a conference or a conversation, starts where the topics that get covered are all over the place, and you really want people to be able to agree on what to talk about, because you feel like you can't get anywhere, you just spin your wheels. That's what it felt like with Keefe in the first years. There was 2015 and 16 I was on Keefe, and it felt like everybody had the great intentions, but we didn't really agree on how to tackle issues affecting the environment. We didn't agree because we didn't even know or necessarily speaking the same language. Some people were very evolved in their thinking and really wanted specific action on one element. Other people wanted to talk about something completely different, and then you get disagreements on a difference of opinion on stuff before you even have a set of ground rules about what you're talking about. So that's what the most important thing about this is, that it gives us reference in scientific, measurable language of what we're actually talking about. The environment is such a complex thing that if you don't have this kind of framework, you can't have conversations. At least that's the takeaway I had from my years on Keefe. So I'm really excited about it. That this will really move the conversation forward. It allows us to draw on the expertise that we have and that we're fortunate enough to have in the city, that everyone's always agreed that I was always on Keefe, but this kind of framework allows us to have reference for all of our conversations, and especially some of these metrics. I just think how important some of these metrics are. Modal split, percentage of non-auto travel under climate. We need to talk about that because we make transit policy decisions. And if we're not constantly having an annual report of what the percentage of people not using non-emission vehicles, we can't really say we're making any progress. The sewer overflows, and I'm glad that it was clarified. Sewer overflows, the practice of having sewage overflow into the environment goes back over 100 years in Kingston, and I feel like we're just starting to make headway now, and I'm actually quite proud of that aspect of what staff are doing to reduce that amount. But again, we need to know exactly how many there are and how we're making progress on it. It's not enough to just know that staff is taking it seriously. We need to be able to measure it. Sometimes the best way with my kids, the best way to get them to learn about something is to say, well, what are we doing right now? So that's what's really exciting about this. This really ties us, it grounds us to fact and reality, and allows us to speak about climate action in a meaningful way. So I'm looking forward to it being a real good set of benchmarks to be able to have productive conversations. Thank you again. Okay, anyone else wish to speak before we vote on this item? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. That's it. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February the 11th in the new year. So I guess this is the last EITP meeting for this decade, unless you, like my father, believes that 2020 is part of this decade, but that's a different question.
I don't know what committee that goes to.
So we'll see you in the new year for EITP, and or sooner if you're on council. Yes, motion to adjourn. Councillor Neal, all those in favor? All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.